In this last section, we are just going to learn a little bit about how to combine grammars. Now, the grammars that you start with may be regular or not regular. They may be context-free. But once you've combined them, most of them are no longer going to be regular. So just remember that, regardless of whether you combine two regular grammars or two context-free grammars using these techniques, the end result is typically going to give you a context-free grammar. So let's suppose that we want to take the union of two languages. There's a really, really easy way to start this, okay, or to do this. And what we're going to assume for a minute is that we have two different grammars and for two different languages, and we want to take the union of those two grammars. We want the union of those two languages. So maybe we have, for example, down here, the language A to the N, B, C to the N, and B to the M, A to the N, right? So these are two different languages. And I have a grammar for this one, and I have a grammar for this one, and I want to figure out the union of those two. And what I say up here is suppose that the start symbol for grammar 1, G1, is S1. So let's do a grammar for this one that starts with S1. So we've got A to the N, B, C to the N. Well, we just did that, didn't we? So we'll just use S1 instead. So S1 goes to A, S1, C, or B. And we need a grammar for the second one, which is B to the M, A to the N, M and N are natural numbers. So this is just actually the language B star, A star, right? This first language here is not regular, but the second one is. So just a bunch of B's followed by a bunch of A's. So maybe we'll have our second grammar be, I'll do that in a different color. So let me underline this piece. And we'll underline this piece in blue, so you know that was the first grammar. And we'll say S2 goes to, let's see, a bunch of B's and then a bunch of A's. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that what we do is we start with the B's, and we'll do a bunch of B's, or we'll go to, I don't know, capital A, and A will go to little a, big A, or lambda. And I think if you look at this, you'll see that this derives, that you can get all the strings that are in this second language here. A bunch of B's, 0 or more B's, followed by 0 more A's. Okay? All right, so let's just look at what I have here before. Suppose that the start symbol for grammar G1 is S1. Well, let's call this grammar G1, and it starts with S1. Suppose that the start symbol for grammar G2 is S2. Let's say this is S2. Right? And sorry, this is G2 and it starts with S2. And G1 and G2 have disjoint sets of non-terminals. That means that all of the non-terminals in this first grammar do not appear in the second one and vice versa. So the only non-terminals in the first grammar are S1, no S1 down here. The non-terminals in here are S2 and A, and neither of them appear there, so we're good. And if I want the language that represents the union of both of these languages, right, then what I can do is I can say, all right, well, I'm just going to add one more production rule. You ready? I'm going to put it at the very top. I'm going to stuff it actually up here. And I'm going to say S goes to S1 or S2. And if I do that and I take all of these production rules together, that forms the language that is the union of these, right? So start and either go, after you start, you either follow this path to create a language that's in a string that's in the first language, or this path to create a string that's in the second language, and the result is you end up with a string that's in the union of these two. Okay, so in this slide, what we're trying to do is we're trying to concatenate two languages, right? So we're trying to have instead of a string, the union of two languages, we're saying take one string from the first language and one string from the second, right? And I'm using the same two languages as examples again, so theoretically I can paste those grammars. So here you go. Here's the grammar from the other slide. In blue, I have the grammar for this first language, and in purple, I have the grammar for the second language. So there's my second language grammar, right? And what I want to do is, instead of having strings that come from either the union, I want to do the concatenation. So I want all my strings to start with A to the N, B, C to the N, and then end with B to the M, A to the N, right? And again, this is pretty easy if I just add one more step here, which is S goes to S1, S2, then you'll see that this whole grammar in here, if it's taken as a whole, represents a grammar for the language that is G1 concatenated with G2. Okay, so one last way to, this is kind of the rules for quickly making grammars from other grammars. In this case, we're going to try and come up with how to do the star of a grammar. And so the question is, if you have a grammar G1 that starts with S1, how do you get a grammar for the closure of that, the star of that grammar? And so as an example here, I said, let's find a grammar, we don't need so big, a grammar for AB star. So a grammar for AB, of course, is very easy because that's just a single string. And this says, well, if you start with S1, right? And so if you already have a grammar for the thing that goes inside of the closure, right? For example, here AB that starts with S1, then to turn that into another grammar for the language AB star, all you do is this trick, right? So we're just going to add that rule. We're adding the rule S. Notice I'm putting it above because I want S to be my start symbol. Goes to S1S or lambda. And if you take these two rules together, I think you'll see that we have the rule for AB star. Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so just to wrap up, we've talked so far about grammars. Just kind of generic grammars. This is something that you didn't necessarily learn in discrete structures, but many people will have learned already, so it's in a much earlier chapter in the book than we're mostly working in. But what we're doing is we've talked about grammars in general in this slide set, and in the next set of slides we'll talk about a subset of grammars called regular grammars.